explains how Radha and Krishna have combined again as one in the form of Lord Chaitanya, right? In order to again relish those same pastimes. But in the later years, especially Lord Chaitanya, when in the last 12 years of his appearance, when he was staying in Jagannath Puri in the Gambhira, he spent those 12 years relishing the exchanges of separation between Radha and Krishna, and exhibited the mood of Srimati Radha. He was Krishna in the form of a devotee with the complexion of Srimati Radharani, enjoying the emotional experience of Srimati Radharani, because that's Lord Chaitanya's purpose. Krishna's purpose as Lord Chaitanya was to relish the love and the affection and the experience that Radharani feels when she reciprocates with Krishna. So Krishnadas Kaviraj he's the most exalted. The philosophy that Krishnadas Kaviraj explains in the Chaitanya Charitamrita tells us that Krishnadas Kaviraj is not a Jagai or a Madai, and neither is he a worm in stool, right? He's the most exalted, advanced devotee. And you know, if you think about the context in which Krishnadas Kaviraj wrote the Chaitanya Charitamrita, he was in his 90s, right? So, you know, how many of your relatives do you know who lived to 90? Okay, yeah, mine too. My great-grandma lived to 101. But in India, how many of your relatives, forget about, how many relatives are you aware of in your family who lived to 90? One, okay. And what were they like at 90?
In villages, very strong.
Huh?
In villages, very strong. All my grandparents crossed 90.
Ah, okay. Yes, the pious people. But very often, you know, you see, I see some of my friends at 60, they're wobbly. Huh? Because, you know, living in India, tough life sometimes for some people, isn't it? Really hard life. And so anyway, Krishnadas Kaviraj was almost blind, and, you know, he was shaky at 90. Right? Still, he was given the order, go to Vrindavan and fulfill your life's mission in Vrindavan. Of course, the mission was to write the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And so he mentions in you know, I'm blind, I'm old and blind and shaky, but somehow I'm still doing the service. And most notably, like Prahlad Maharaj, he's presenting himself as if, you know, I'm as unqualified, or I'm a Jagai and a Madai. But he wasn't. But that's how he was feeling. This is the paradox of the mood of a devotee. Difficult to understand the mood of a devotee. Prabhupada often quote that. There's that verse. You know, it's very difficult to understand the mind of a devotee, because he's a very exalted personality, yet he's presenting himself as if he's a worm in stool. Huh? I'm the most fallen. And so we see that consistently. We even see that in Srimati Radharani. That same, even though she's the most exalted, she presents herself as the most fallen. So even we hear the self-depreciation of the devotees, but we can understand by the behaviour of the devotee, by the actions of a devotee, how advanced they are, how focused they are in their service to Krishna. Yeah, Prabhupada says, a pure Vaishnava actually thinks of himself in this way, right? Unqualified, lower than the worms in stool, and more sinful than Jagai and Madai. Similarly, although Prahlad Maharaj was a pure, exalted Vaishnava, he thought himself most unqualified to offer prayers to the Supreme Lord. And then Prabhupada says, we should follow in the footsteps of such devotees. Mahajana Jena Gatasa Panta. Every pure Vaishnava should think like this. One should not be falsely proud of his Vaishnava qualifications. Interesting story that I heard this morning, just for a little bit of reflection, or looking at this point of view from a different angle. The lake opposite, or Lake Kund, I guess you could call it, opposite the Albert Road Temple in Calcutta, has just been renamed. Right? I think it's now called Bhaktivedanta Sarovara. Right? It was called Victoria Lake. Right? And Prabhupada said there should be a temple in the middle of this lake. It was opposite the Calcutta temple, right? And it wasn't an easy place to live in, the Calcutta temple. In order to get to the bathroom and get to upstairs, you had to go through Prabhupada's room. It was very cramped. Anybody here been to Calcutta Temple? ISKCON Temple in Calcutta? Yeah, it's different now because it's been renovated and done up. But I remember when I first went there in '81, I think it was pretty much as it was when Prabhupada was there. And so it was very inconvenient, and the single men and the single women were living in separate quarters, but they only had one bathroom, and it had two doors. And if you didn't lock both doors, then you could be embarrassed. So the brahmacharis came up. They were talking to Prabhupada about the problem of the crowd, and they said we should send the women away. We should send the women away, and of course this was on a morning walk, and Prabhupada just heard the suggestion, and then as Prabhupada came back to the temple, then Malati and her friends, I've forgotten what the other two devotees' names. They had been cleaning Prabhupada's room. They'd cooked breakfast for Prabhupada. They had made all of the preparations for Srila Prabhupada's return, and then they opened up the door as Prabhupada came, and then Prabhupada said to the brahmacharis, "You should associate with these devotees, and then you'll go back home, back to Godhead." And then On another occasion, Riddhananda Maharaj tells Prabhupada went to San Francisco and for the Rath Yatra, and the temple president was with Srila Prabhupada having a conversation, and he was bragging how strict they were in the San Francisco temple, and how they didn't allow the women in the temple room when the men were chanting japa, right? And Prabhupada said, why not? And the temple president said, we don't want the women disturbing the brahmacharis, right? And Prabhupada said the men should go and live in the forest if they get disturbed by the women, and let the women chant in the temple room. Which made me think, we follow that rule, so maybe we shouldn't. We should maybe rethink. Made me think we should rethink. But interesting. Association. The idea is we associate to make advancement. Asat Sangatyage Vaishnavachar, where we avoid the materialistic mentality because it degrades. It degrades us. And we seek the association of the advanced devotees. But very interesting, the advanced devotees don't think of themselves as being advanced. They don't present themselves as being advanced. They treat everybody equally. Right? This is a symptom of advancement. Even the fallen, they're respectful to, right? This is mentioned by Lord Chaitanya in the Shikshastika, this point. If we want to be successful in chanting Hare Krishna, then we need to cultivate the mood of manadena, amanadena, right? We should be respectful to others and not expect any respect for ourselves. The symptom of a devotee is that they're like a tree, right? Very, very tolerant. Prabhupada explains, Lord Chaitanya explains, a tree suffers heat and cold. And even if it's not being watered, right, no protest, right? A tree suffers all of the ignominy of, standing in the courtyard. Blistering hot sunshine in the summertime, just now coming, and, cold and wet in the wintertime, and yet no protest, always tolerant. Yet a tree freely gives its shelter to others. Right? So, very, very tolerant, and yet always prepared to give its fruits or its branches, its shade generously to others without complaint. So Lord Chaitanya recommends that's the mood that a devotee has to cultivate, to be tolerant of difficulties and always be prepared to give to others effectively, right? And be prepared to respect everyone, but not expect respect for oneself. And in that way, then one can make progress in the chanting of Hare Krishna. Right? The chanting of Hare Krishna is the means of success for the devotees, especially in the age of Kali. Krishna Vanam Tvisha Krishnam Sango Pangasta Parshadam Yagyai Sankitam Praye Yujantihi Sumeda Saha. Those who have just got a little bit of intelligence will take up the chanting of Hare Krishna, because by the simple process of chanting Hare Krishna, one can achieve all perfection in life. But how to perfect the chanting of Hare Krishna? One has to cultivate, Lord Chaitanya explains, one has to cultivate this mood of humility, tolerance and humility. And we see that. We see that in Srimati Radharani's mood. We see that in Lord Chaitanya's mood. We see that here in Prahlad Maharaj's mood of service. He's a very exalted devotee, yet he considers himself to be the most fallen. And of course, that that has to be genuinely cultivated. Not that we, it's easy to imitate these symptoms of a very exalted devotee, but they're not for imitation. The practice of bhakti has to be executed with great sincerity and seriousness. So, Prabhupada quotes that verse, one should not be falsely proud of his Vaishnava, his or her Vaishnava qualifications. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has therefore instructed us, that verse, Trinadapi Sunichena Todoreva Sahishnuna Amanina Manadina Kitaniya Sadahari. One should chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than the straw in the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. Then Prabhupada says here, unless one is meek and humble, to make progress in spiritual life is very difficult. So that's why we see this, even though the devotees, Krishnadas Kaviraj, Prahlad Maharaj, even Lord Chaitanya, very, very exalted, yet they still present themselves as being fallen, because this is the first characteristic or quality of a essential quality of a devotee, and so exhibited by Prahlad Maharaj in this first of his prayers. Okay, does anybody have any comments or questions on these points? Manmohan Prabhu.
How do we avoid false humility or react to false humility?
Ooh, I don't know. I'm having trouble with that one myself. Without being falsely humble. Stay in the association of devotees. Always maintain a service attitude. Follow the orders of the spiritual master. I think they're probably good tips to start with. Yeah. Maintain a good service attitude. I think that's the main, and always serve the Vaishnavas. And don't be surprised if you're tested You will be tested. You know, it's just amazing how Prabhupada had such a very humble demeanour, despite the fact that he was very advanced, he was very learned, he was very successful, right? Still he maintained very humble demeanour. And of course that's what we see with others, with all exalted devotees. So we have to follow in their footsteps. That's what Prabhupada is saying here, Mahajana Jena Gita Sapanta. And that following in the footsteps is basically being faithful to the spiritual master, being faithful to the order, the instructions of one's spiritual master, or masters, plural. And I think in ISKCON, remaining faithful to Srila Prabhupada and the preaching mission that Prabhupada encouraged us to pursue, and staying in that environment, even though on occasion we may get a bit proud of whatever we do. Krishna will ensure that we'll be cut down, we'll be kept down to, chopped down to size, right? Yeah. Is that okay? Mama Han, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, okay, Prabhu.
Yeah.
It's so difficult because here Prahlad is thinking that he is not qualified, which is genuine. Sometimes we can do this service, but then we avoid it on the pretext of false humility that I'm not able to do this, and that is where challenge comes, that the capacity can do, but then you avoid that.
Yeah, well, that's humility, often I was given, one of my regrets as the temple president is that I don't have anybody telling me what to do. Ajahn Charipa's always telling me what to do, but that's something else. And so there's nobody to, I miss the opportunity or the occasion where I would have to report to the temple president. You know what I mean? And I really enjoyed and appreciated working with Balaram, who was the previous temple president, who basically trained me in many aspects of what it means to manage a temple. And he used to give me some tough missions, tough projects, right? And I used to think, what do you make it? Why are you asking me to do something that's practically impossible, right? What are you doing that for? I learned over time that I should embrace tough challenges, right? And what I learned from that experience was, despite something appearing to be very, very difficult, if you put aside your preconceptions as to how things should be and put yourself in Krishna's hands, then amazing things can happen. Right? Amazing things can happen, even if something looks just preposterously ridiculous. So having and that's like having a master, having a spiritual master. The spiritual master will do this, do that, do the other thing. Even what Prabhupada's encouraging us to preach. It's not easy to preach, to promote Krishna consciousness. There's always going to be obstacles. We see that with Prahlad Maharaj. He's a very, very saintly, pure-hearted devotee, and yet what happens? His dad wants to, kill him, basically, right? So there's always going to be opposition. And in the face of that opposition, it's easy to be challenged and to wilt, right? So that's why the association of the devotees is important, and why the mood of service is important. Because that faith in Krishna and that ability to serve despite difficulties or challenges or obstacles, that breeds that mood of humility, because it's not easy to face difficulties and to face problems, or to have a hard taskmaster, right? Have somebody say, okay, here's what you got to do, and you think, what? That's nuts. You can't do that. That's the initial response. Think, okay, all right, I'll at least give it a try, right? That's a tough lesson. To first of all to embrace, and then to be successful. I mean, more than once Balaram would say, do this or do that, and I think, God, that's impossible. And then I'd give it a crack and would actually do better than what he said, because just took on the challenge, if you like, right? So taking on the challenge of serving in Srila Prabhupada's ISKCON that'll smash your false humility, don't it? The only problem is when you're successful, then you start, right? And even in a devotee, that's not unusual, and you see that in the descriptions of the emotions of a devotee. Simultaneously, humility and pride will exist at the same time, right? So devotees thinking, yes, Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead and he's my master and I can do anything. Step aside. Right, you guys? Right, but at the same time he's thinking, but I'm such a fallen rascal. Right? So, it's the emotional experience of a devotee is both exhilarating and exuberant, as well as, crushingly destroying. Right? And so, in the development of the devotional character, there's experiences where life can be a little bit confusing sometimes. Because on the one hand, devotees feeling great enthusiasm and faith and encouragement from Krishna, and then also feeling crushed and destroyed because he's not very qualified. Right? And Krishna will reveal that to us time and time again. And we get that opportunity to experience those emotions by rendering service, by being a good servant of the devotees, and finding an environment where we can actually serve. Jade.
Hare Krishna. You mentioned how Radharani has the highest humility. I just want to ask if you can elaborate on that, if there's any like specific pastimes that you can mention.
If I can elaborate on Radharani's humility, Hare Krishna. No, I can't. Read the Chaitanya Charitamrita is my suggestion. You know, I was, Hare Krishna, I was reading Guru Govinda Maharaj's Embankment of Separation, which is a very nice book, right? And I was thinking, where does he get all of this stuff from? And then I was looking at a lecture by Srila Prabhupada on Radhashtami in 68, I think it was. There's 3 lectures that Prabhupada gave on Radhashtami. And in 68, I think 70 and 73, Montreal, and then in London, I think twice. Yeah. And Prabhupada refers to Radharani's talking to the bumblebee, right? If you want to understand Radharani's mood, Prabhupada says, look at, read Radharani's criticism of the bumblebee after she saw Uddhava, right? That's one thing. And then the other thing is, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Leela, chapter 4, there's a long description. That's what we should read to try to approach this mood, right? Yeah. That's what Prabhupada recommends as a beginning. Yep. And let me know how you go. Yeah. Wonderful reading. Yeah. Okay, I think we should finish here. Grantaraj Śrīmad Bhāgavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaura Bhaktivedanta ki jai.